The warrior in Mr. Pandaria from start to finish is one of the most fun classes to play. It's going to bring incredible damage, amazing raid cooldowns, and even brilliant external cooldowns to use on your tank, even if you're not a protection warrior. And the talents are so versatile that you've almost got a talent choice for every situation. So if you're not aware already, I'm breaking down all of the classes into playlists. So once this playlist starts to get a bit more filled up, because this is the first one being a look at the talents, you'll be able to find a link to the playlist in the description, or of course just on the main channel going to the playlist section. So let's dive straight in. Level 15 is going to be all movement related talents. So firstly, you're going to have Juggernaut, where you can charge every 12 seconds instead of every 20 seconds. Double Time, where you can use charge twice in a row, and each has a 20-second recharge timer. But an important note with that is you'll only get the rage once every 12 seconds. And finally, Warbringer, where your charge also pins a target to the ground, rooting it for 4 seconds and reducing movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. You're going to use these situationally because it's ultimately going to come down to what you want. Really, Warbringer is a PvP talent, and I rarely see a situation in PvE where you're actually going to use it, but it's still a nice talent to have in your toolkit if you do find a use for it in PvE. Then the real default choice is going to come between Juggernaut and Double Time. And it's going to come down to, are you going to need to charge more than every 12 seconds because you've got to get in and out of a fight, or there's lots of ads and you're charging between them? Then Double Time's probably going to be the way to go. Whereas if you're not going to need to charge for at least every 12 seconds, then it's going to be Juggernaut. You're really going to have to feel out each fight and see what ads you're having to switch to and things like that, and then you'll know what talents to use. But ideally, you're going to be choosing between Juggernaut and Double Time 99% of the time. Next up is your survival talents, and you've got Enraged Regen, Second Wind, and Impending Victory. Now, Enraged Regen is on a 1-minute cooldown, and it instantly heals you for 10% of your total health and an additional 10% over 5 seconds. And this can be used while stuns. Now, you always want to use this when you're enraged because it's going to double the effect when you use it when you are enraged. So that's how you're going to get maximum value out of it. It's definitely the go-to talent as, let's say, a protection warrior. Whereas for DPS warriors, you can't guarantee in low levels of gear that you're always going to have enrage up. So you may get more value out of one of the other two talents. Next up is Second Wind, where whenever you're below 35% health, you just regenerate 3% health per second. Now, if you're finding yourself low health on a particular encounter very frequently, then obviously this might actually benefit you a lot more and give you more HPS over the course of a fight. Whereas I think for most DPS warriors, Impending Victory is going to be the go-to choice because it's on a 30-second cooldown and it replaces your Victory Rush. You can instantly attack the target causing X amount of damage. This only costs 10 rage, by the way, but it will heal you for 20% of your maximum health. If you kill an enemy that yields experience or honor, it also resets the cooldown of Impending Victory. Now, you potentially don't even need to use this as a self-heal. You can use it just for extra damage if you're arms, for example, because there will be gaps in the rotation. You could use this as protection and fury as well, don't get me wrong, but I think Enraged Regen for a much more controlled way of being able to get health back. But to get full value, you have to be enraged. Or Impending Victory, where I'd say more as a DPS warrior, you could use this. You wouldn't really use it as protection because, again, Enraged Regen, you get the health when you want it. But ultimately, use whichever one of these fits the situation that you're in. Next up at level 45 is CC talent. So you've got Staggering Shout, which is on a 40-second cooldown and causes all enemies within 20 yards that are snared to become rooted for 5 seconds, and damage caused may interrupt the effect. Piercing Hail costs 10 rage and just snares all enemies within 15 yards, reducing their movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. Shame you can't use them two together, innit, really? And then finally, Disrupting Shout, which is on a 40-second cooldown and interrupts all spell casting within 10 yards and prevents any spell in that school from being cast for 4 seconds. This ability shares a 15-second cooldown with Pummel, so just an AoE interrupt, which is absolutely insane, and to be fair, I'd say that's more or less the default choice for most warriors. Of course, Staggering Shout can be useful in PvP, or if there's a situation where you need to control ads, and Piercing Hail will probably have its place as well, but I think 9 times out of 10, you'll be using the AoE interrupt, just because it's pretty insane. Next up at level 60, you get a big boy DPS talent. So Blade Storm's going to be nothing new to anyone. You just spin round doing an absolute crap ton of damage. During Blade Storm, you continue to dodge, block and parry and are immune to movement impairing and loss of control effects. However, you can only perform shout abilities. Blade Storm's just absolutely sick. Anytime there's AoE, just any multiple target at all, this is what you're going to be running. Hands down, there's no discussion. That's what you're going to use. Even if there's only small portions of the fight where there's loads of ads, this is still going to be far, far more beneficial than either of the other talents. Shockwave, you'll know what Shockwave is. On a 40-second cooldown, you just send out a frontal cone of damage, stunning all targets within 10 yards for 4 seconds. If you deal damage to 3 or more targets, it puts the cooldown to 20 seconds. Now, because the other two just do so much more damage, this you may use as a tank. If you're doing challenge modes or something like that, you're definitely going to use this as a protection warrior, purely because it gives you more control and the damage is like kind of neither here nor there. But in general, as an arms or a fury warrior, yeah, you're not going to run Shockwave. But if it's a pure single target fight, then you would run Dragon Roar. Now, on a 1-minute cooldown, you roar ferociously, causing X amount of damage to all enemies within 8 yards and knocking them back and knocking them down. And Dragon Roar is always a critical strike and ignores all armor on the target. Now, the reason this is a single target ability, when you look at it and you're like, wait, you said to use this on single target, but it's AoE. Well, actually, the more targets that are hit by it, the less damage it does to each of those targets. So the maximum value you get from it is on one target. So ideally, even if ads get involved, you really want to just be hitting the primary target with this and the primary target only. That's why for AoE, you're going to use Blade Storm, and single target, you're going to use Dragon Roar. And if you want some control, or you need to stun ads to help your tank out, or you are the tank, then you're going to use Shockwave. Next up are kind of defensive utility abilities, which I only think there's one clear winner here, but you might have a different opinion when we look through them. Firstly, Mass Spell Reflection. It's on a 1-minute cooldown, it has no rage cost, and it reflects the next spell cast on you or on all party and raid members within 20 yards for 5 seconds. So you can use this to help someone else. So if a tank's going to take a really, really big hit from a spell, and you're using this, they'll call for you to use it, bang, it reflects it, they take no damage. In certain situations, you can use this, and it's strong. Safeguard is kind of tore out of the protection tree in Cataclysm, so on a 30-second cooldown, you basically intervene, taking the next melee or ranged attack from the target that you intervene to, reducing their damage taken by 20%. For 6 seconds. It's not bad, and as a tank you might use this, but as a DPS you wouldn't want to use this because you don't want to take the hit that the tank could take, and they'll take less damage from it. The one that I think is just a clear winner and there's no competition is Vigilance. Now, as a DPS warrior, to be able to bring a really, really strong external cooldown for your tank is quite rare. So on a 2-minute cooldown, you focus your protective gaze on the party or raid member, reducing their damage taken by 30% for 12 seconds. 12 seconds of 30% DR. Like, that is massive. That is so, so good that I think not only do you want most DPS warriors to be running this, because that is just amazing to be using on your main tank, but you also want to be making sure that you get maximum value out of this. There's no point having a warrior in the group speccing into Vigilance and never using it. Just get it used. Even if there's not a point in the fight where there's that sort of danger moment for the tank, it's going to help your healers out, and it's going to help you out as the tank. Call in for your warrior to Vigilance you. I absolutely love this from a raid leading perspective. Having another 30% DR for 12 seconds to be able to use on anyone who needs it hasn't even got to be on a tank, is absolutely amazing. So yeah, I think 90% of the time, every warrior should be running Vigilance, but as a protection warrior, arguably, you could use Safeguard as well, because you would then just use that on your other tank buddy, and it's got a much lower cooldown. And then finally, at level 90, your big boy talents, where again, unfortunately, I feel like there's only one real clear winner. Firstly, you've got Avatar, which transforms you into a Colossus for 24 seconds, breaking all roots and snares and increasing your damage dealt by 20%. The breaking of snares and roots is obviously nice, but the flat 20% damage is what you'd be taking it for, but you're still probably going to get more damage out of either of the other talents. And now Bloodbath, this is what you're going to see most warriors run, I would say pretty much all the time. Protection, arms, and even Fury, but Fury can get a lot of good use out of the final one, which we'll get to in a minute. What it does is for the next 12 seconds, it causes your melee special attacks to deal an additional 30% damage as bleed damage over 6 seconds. While bleeding, the target moves at 50% reduced speed. So it's also a slow, which is nice for PvP, but this just does a lot of damage. And even single target for arms is really strong. For protection, it's probably going to give the most threat and the most damage output. But for single target, you could arguably use Stormbolt as well, because Stormbolt's on a 30-second cooldown, it's instant cast, and it hurls your weapon at an enemy, causing 125% weapon damage and stunning the target for 4 seconds. Now, the big thing about this that makes it really strong on single target is it deals 500% weapon damage to the target if they're permanently immune to stuns. So basically on bosses. Now, if there's moments of real burst where you need to kill a boss really, really fast, for example, Spirit Kings on Heroic, the new boss comes before the old one dies. So dispatching of that old one is incredibly important. So something like Stormbolt there is a DPS where you can do massive amounts of damage very quickly, could be a good option. I'd say 70% of the time you'll be using Bloodbath, and then 30% of the time probably Stormbolt, but it really is going to come down to the fight. And remember, you never want to Stormbolt a target that can be stunned, because that's going to be such a waste of damage. Now, interestingly, as Fury using two-handed weapons, Stormbolt should be the go-to in terms of single target damage. So again, I really think the warrior talents are in a great place. I think there's a lot of changing around and adapting to each fight and using what's going to give you the best results on a fight-by-fight basis is going to be key. But overall, a really good place, and I think most warriors will be really happy. So if you enjoyed the video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe. Check out Rested XP for the quickest way to level in all versions of WoW. It's an affiliate link, so any guides bought go towards supporting the channel. And if you want to support the channel even further, consider joining as a member. I will be doing more members-only videos. I do them sporadically, but I have actually got one due this weekend, so keep an eye out for that, and I'll see you on the next one.